Shalom. Welcome. I'm Rabbi Scott from Beth Yeshua Messianic Synagogue in Fort Myers, Florida. Welcome to our home. This is our midweek Torah teaching video. We broadcast these on YouTube from time to time to share our midweek thoughts on the Torah portions, and pleased that you can join us this evening. A couple of announcements to begin with. Beth Yeshua Messianic Synagogue in Fort Myers, Florida is we are open and in-person services. We'd be pleased and excited to fellowship and worship with you if you'd like to join us. If you're visiting or if you live local in the area, please reach out to us. You can find information on our website or contact information below in the description, and that way you can join us if you like. We'd love to meet you. Likewise, also, if you're interested in this ministry, we broadcast our Shabbat services live every Saturday. They are live streamed, but then you can also watch them at another time, and that's available to you. If you would like to subscribe to this ministry, then you can get notifications when the videos are available, whether it be our live stream or our midweek Torah studies, or we're finishing up a Revelation series, any other teachings we do down the road. If you'd like to get notifications on these, then by all means subscribe. If you have any questions or discussion, my email address is included in the description below, and you can reach out to me personally, and I would love to dialogue or discuss any of these items or any questions that you might have. The last thing that I will say is, for those of you who are supporting this ministry, again, thank you. We appreciate the blessings and the generosity, especially during these days. If you would like to support this ministry is 100% supported by your gifts and donations. If you would like to support this ministry for the furtherance of the gospel of Yeshua and for the kingdom of Adonai, then you will find a link below to our donation site where you can continue to support us as you would like. And again, just thank you to all those who do support this ministry. Okay, let's begin. This week we are in Bamidbar, Numbers. It is chapter 4, verse 21 through chapter 7, verse 89. And this is Nasso. Nasso, which means take. We'll begin with a census, or we begin with a summary, as we do. A summary is a very good place to begin with the Torah portion. This week's summary. The Parshat begins with a census, Nasso, take, as in take a census. We begin with the Gershon family, responsible for serving and transporting loads, carrying the curtains, the parachet, the roof, the ropes, and tools for the assembly and for the care and transportation of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And then we have the Merari family, responsible for carrying the frames, the timbers, the crossbars, the posts, along with the pegs and ropes, etc. The Kohat family, their tasks covered in the previous Parsha. They're in charge of disassembly of the Mishkan, covering the furniture, carrying the furniture, things like this. Then we have some discussion of expelling anybody with Tzara'at. Anyone who touches a corpse is unclean. When a person sins against another, you are to confess the sin, and then you are to make restitution plus 20%. If you can't make restitution to the person or the family, then restitution goes to Adonai, which is a kind of a fascinating principle for those of us who are concerned with social justice. The idea that, yes, the number is over and above that which can be calculated as the damages. The restitution is 20% above. No more, no less, and that is codified here. Contributions to the Kohen, the priest, belong to the Kohen. And then we have what is called the Sotah ritual, the woman suspected of adultery. And then we have the vow of the Nazir. The Nazir is what we call the Nazirite vow. It is a vow of personal consecration. It is for a man or a woman. And then we have the priestly blessing. In this way you are to place the name of Adonai on the people. And then we have the offerings of the leaders of the 12 tribes. And finally, when Moses goes into the tent of meeting, he hears the voice of Adonai speaking to him from above the ark cover, from between the two cherubim. And then it says this, and he spoke to him, which is a it says that he heard him speaking and he spoke to him, which the commentators would suggest that Adonai was speaking. Who was he speaking to? Or was he speaking in the heavenly court, and the presence, the Shekhinah, the glory of Adonai, there on the cover of the ark, and you heard him speaking, as it were. Lots of discussion on that, and he spoke to him. When we see that sort of geometry, that sort of literary geometry in various places in the Torah, one of which you might remember is at the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, when they're going up the mountain, and when Isaac is speaking to his father, and then he said, "My father." He says, and he said. So it has the implication of they were talking, and then all of a sudden Isaac says something, "My father." Here we have Adonai speaking to him, the voice speaking to him from above the ark cover, and he spoke to him. So it's that emphasis of what's happening there. Anyway, lots of discussion on that. So this is our summary. This concludes our summary for this week. I want to address two things specifically. I want to address the Sotah and the laws of the Nazir. I think it's interesting how these two systems are juxtaposed. The laws of the Sotah, this ritual, and then following it, the laws of the Nazir. In chapter 5 of Numbers, we have this strange ritual, and if you want to turn to chapter 5 and follow along with me, you can. But Midbar Numbers, chapter 5. Adonai says to Moshe, "Tell the people of Israel, if a man's wife goes astray and is unfaithful to him, that is, if another man goes to bed with her without her husband's knowledge, so that she becomes impure secretly, and there is no witness against her, and she was not caught in the act, then, if a spirit of jealousy comes over him, and he is jealous of his wife, and she has become impure, or, for that matter, if the spirit of jealousy comes over him, and he is jealous of his wife, and she has not become impure." So we've got two situations here. The spirit of jealousy in the husband is the consistent, that's in both situations, both scenarios here. But the distinctives of these two scenarios is that she has become impure or she has not become impure. How does she become impure? By lying with another man. There's no witnesses against her and she was not caught in the act. But it says this, he is jealous, she has not become impure. Verse 15, he is to bring his wife to the Cohen, along with the offering for her, 2 quarts of barley flour, on which he has not poured olive oil or put frankincense, because it is a grain offering for jealousy, a grain offering for remembering, for recalling guilt to mind. What we have here is we have, in real simple terms, straightforward terms, what we have here is a marriage that's in crisis. We have a marriage that's in real trouble. We have this first possibility that there's been infidelity, and if that's the case, then there is real crises. Infidelity in marriage is a real problem. Most marriages are not going to survive that. Second possibility, there's no infidelity. Either the husband is paranoid without basis. In other words, the husband has a spirit of jealousy. He's paranoid. He's got no basis for being paranoid or suspicious. Or, and this is under the second possibility, with no infidelity, or the husband is paranoid and has some basis for his suspicion. Now remember, this is all in the context of the husband bringing his wife to the priest. The Cohen will bring her forward. Let's continue in verse 16. The Cohen will bring her forward and place her before Adonai. The Cohen will put holy water in a clay pot, and then the Cohen will take some of the dust on the floor of the tabernacle and put it in the water. The Cohen will place the woman before Adonai, unbind the woman's hair, and put the grain offering for remembering in her hands, the grain offering for jealousy, while the Cohen has in his hand the water of embitterment and cursing. The Cohen will make her swear by saying to her, if no man has gone to bed with you, if you have not gone astray to make yourself unclean while under your husband's authority, then be free from this water of embitterment and cursing. But if you have in fact gone astray while under your husband's authority and become unclean, because some other man other than your husband has gone to bed with you, then the Cohen is to make the woman swear with an oath that includes a curse. The Kohen will say to the woman, may Adonai make you an object of cursing and condemnation among your people by making your private parts shrivel and your abdomen swell up. May this water that causes the curse to go into your inner parts and make your abdomen swell up and your private parts shrivel up. The woman is to respond, Amen, Amen. So one of the things I want you to key on here is unbinding the woman's hair. Her hair is to be unbound. Hold on to that for a moment. One thing to make note of here is that the woman is coming voluntarily. So what's really happening here? Let's analyze this. You know, you kind of have to get beyond how bizarre the scenario is, and you have to get beyond how troubling the scenario is. This is a marriage in real crises, and if you have people in your family or people around you, or yourself for that matter, if your marriage is in crises, nothing else matters at that point. Everything is bad. Everything is really up in the air. There's much turmoil, and that's all you can think about. And so I understand if that's where you live right now, it's going to be very hard for you to view this scenario, this passage, with any sort of detachment. But a little bit of detachment is helpful so that we can try to understand what's happening here. And so we have this. What I want you to do is make note of the fact that the woman is coming voluntarily. So if she is guilty, it'd be very risky for her to come before Adonai like this. There's going to be a little conference with the priest. He's going to explain to you what you're to do, what the husband is to do, and what he's going to do, and this is what's going to happen, and then I'm going to do this, and here's the passage of the scroll that talks about all this. She's going to get all of her information, and she's going to know what happens. So if she's guilty, and remember, this is in a time of supernatural miracles, just after the signs and the wonders of the Mount Sinai and the presence of Adonai and the fire and the smoke and the shofar, it's a very supernatural experience. So she has every reason to believe, if she's guilty, this absolutely will happen. And so it begs the question, who's going to come and do this scenario? Who's going to go through this ritual? Well, obviously there is one person who would go through this ritual, and that is the woman who knows that she's innocent. If she was guilty, it'd be very risky. Remember, this is a time when Adonai would judge harshly. We have examples of people being consumed with fire, being swallowed up by the earth. So it's not a time to mess with Adonai. It's not a time to see if you can get away with this. So no woman is going to agree to this ritual who is guilty and knows it in her heart. The only person who's going to agree to this ritual is the woman who's innocent. And the only person who's going to bring his wife to the priest like this is the man who is suspicious or has reason to doubt. So the only time you're actually going to see this scenario play out is with a woman who's innocent and a husband who is suspicious. And I can't think of a circumstance that would be more, that would be an indication. I mean, just a profound, let's say it this way. It is a profound indication of a marriage in crisis. Let's just leave it at that. The conclusion is this marriage is in deep trouble. The judgment, if there is a judgment, will render the woman infertile. In that day, that would have been an economic and social death sentence. A woman without children would be thought to be cursed. Furthermore, she's going to lose her husband when all this is said and done, because her husband's going to divorce her for unfaithfulness. And so her abdomen's going to swell up and her private parts are going to shrivel up. And I mean, this is what we're talking about here. Verse 23, moving on. The Kohen is to write these curses on a scroll, wash them off into the water of embitterment, and make the woman drink the water of embitterment and cursing. The water of cursing will enter her and become bitter. Then the Kohen is to remove the grain offering for jealousy from the woman's hand, wave the grain offering before Adonai, and bring it into the altar. The Kohen is to take a handful of the grain offering as its reminder portion and make it go up in smoke on the altar. Afterwards, he is to make the woman drink the water. Notice here the writing on the scroll and then washing it off. Okay, so it says this: the Kohen is to write these curses. So what is it that is written? He's writing curses. What is the curse? Well, if we go back to verse 21, you will see the curse is this: may Adonai make you an object of cursing and condemnation among your people by making your private parts shrivel and your abdomen swell up. May this water that causes the curse go into your inner parts and make your abdomen swell and your private parts shrivel up, it says. Verse 21 and 22. What strikes you about this, and this is not immediately apparent in the Christian tradition. In the Jewish tradition, the written name of Adonai is very holy. If you have the name of Adonai written on a piece of paper, in the Jewish tradition, you don't throw away that piece of paper. That piece of paper is ceremonially buried, if you will, and according to certain rules. Now, that may seem kind of bizarre in certain people's perspective, but consider this, that the name of Adonai is so holy, and we're called upon to keep it holy and to view him as holy, that that we're going to preserve that, even to the degree that we're not going to write the name of Adonai on a piece of paper casually. So if I was writing a note on a piece of scrap paper, I wouldn't write the name of Adonai on it, because that note would likely just get thrown away someday. So I don't even want to write the name casually with the possibility that this paper might get thrown away. So this is why in many groups you see the word Hashem instead of the Yud He Vav He or other name of God. You see Hashem. In some places you'll see the written name of God as G-D or L-RD, or you'll see people use Adonai, or it'll be Adonai spelled A-D-N-A-I. There's different ways that you see it in different places, but here, but just the point is that in Jewish tradition, the name of Adonai is very holy, and so you wouldn't casually write it, and you wouldn't desecrate it. You wouldn't do anything that would possibly lead to its desecration. And yet here we have in these instructions, look at this. Here Adonai is instructing the priest to write the name of Adonai on this scroll. What is going to be written on this scroll? The curse is going to be written. What is the curse? May Adonai make you an object of cursing and condemnation, and so on. Verses 21 and 22. This is the verbiage of the curse. Verses 21 and 22 would have been written, handwritten, on a scroll. So we have Adonai's name right there on the scroll, and Adonai is instructing the priest to write the name of Adonai on the scroll, which would have been a parchment of some kind, and then wash it away. To the traditional Jewish perspective, this is a very profound moment. Why would Adonai give this instruction to the priest? Why would Adonai go there? It's almost like Adonai is giving permission. He's giving a requirement to desecrate his name. Let's continue with verse 20. Hold on to that question. We'll try to address that question here in a little bit. Verse 27, continuing on, when he, that is the priest, has made her drink the water, then if she's unclean and has been unfaithful to her husband, the water that causes the curse will enter her, become bitter, so that her abdomen swells and her private parts shrivel up, and the woman will become an object of cursing among her people. But if the woman is not unclean but clean, then she will be innocent and have children. We're all adults here, so we can speak, plainly about what's being said here. But do you see the irony of something going in? The water will enter her. It is kind of a sexual reference there of what happened when she was unfaithful, of the man's seed going into her. Making her unclean, and now the water of cursing is going into her. So there's a parallel there. So a few moments. Let's see. Let me read on verse 21. When he has made her drink the water, she's unclean and has been unfaithful to her husband. The water that causes the curse will enter her and become bitter, so that her abdomen swells, her private parts shrivel up. Again, there is a sexual sort of referencing here with private parts. The woman will become an object of cursing among her people, but if the woman is not unclean but clean, then she will be innocent and will have children. All right. So a few moments ago, we are reading about this marriage that is clearly in trouble, clearly in crisis. And now we've survived the ritual. The woman is not unclean, verse 28, but clean. In other words, she hasn't been unfaithful. She's clean. Then she'll be innocent and she'll have children. And there's your Pollyanna ending to this ritual. A few moments ago, we're reading about a marriage that's clearly in trouble. The husband has reason or does not have reason, either way, to be suspicious. And now she's going to go have children? Where does this come from? Really? They're going to go home and say, okay, well, that was an episode. I'm glad we got that behind us. Are you ready to have children? Let's move on with our lives and the destiny that Adonai has called us to. This is perplexing to me that they would do this. Verse 29, this is the law for jealousy, when either a wife under her husband's authority goes astray and becomes unclean, or the spirit of jealousy comes over a husband and he becomes jealous of his wife. Then he is to place the woman before Adonai. The Kohen is to deal with her in accordance with all of this law. So what we're doing is we're kind of summarizing. The husband will be clear of guilt, but the wife will bear the consequences of her guilt. It says here the husband will be clear of guilt. But also, if the ritual reveals her faithfulness, the husband must likewise release his suspicion. He can't hold on to his suspicion. The end of this ritual, let me say it in practical terms. Imagine, if you will, let's take a step into the practical, and imagine, if you will, that there was actually a couple that were going through this scenario. And at the end of this scenario, at the end of this ritual, one of these two are going to be guilty. Either the wife is guilty or the husband is guilty for suspicion and paranoia. I mean, do you see that? I mean, either she's guilty or she's innocent. If she's guilty, then we're going to know that, and the husband is going to be vindicated. However, if she's the one who's vindicated, then the husband is going to be guilty for suspicion and for paranoia. And it would be easy to kind of say that, to polarize the situation. But what do we have in real life? And in fact, this is probably a little bit of where this scenario comes from. And what I want to describe to you is a marriage that is in such crisis, and this is what some of the commentators will talk about in this passage. A marriage that is in such crisis that the woman is willing to do something to cause her husband suspicion. And so, there are occasions when a marriage, when a husband or a wife does something, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the spouse will become suspicious. For example, if I were to all of a sudden, one of my wife's friends were to say, "Oh, I saw Scott having coffee with so and so," then my wife would be like, "Wait a minute, where does this come from? What were you doing?" There is an immediate suspicion there. Now, if there's a reasonable explanation, that suspicion goes away pretty quickly. But there's something here that suggests that the woman was doing something in order to cause suspicion, and especially if the woman, just play this scenario out. Try to visualize this scenario. But the woman is innocent, first of all. Because the only woman who's going to go through this is the one who's innocent. The woman is innocent, and she does something that causes her husband to initiate this ritual. Now, why would she do that if she's innocent? Now, one conclusion might be that they were on the way to infidelity and didn't quite get there, and the husband got involved before it got there. But if that's the case, then why would they go on to have children? This marriage is in crisis, and they need some help. This is what I'm suggesting to you. This hint here at the end that they're going to go on and have children is that it could be a wife trying to get her husband's attention and creating a scenario by which it prompts him to go to the priest and have this ritual in order to prove her innocence and her fidelity. And now she can say to her husband, now that we've got that behind us, let's go have children. We can move on. Those are the three kind of narratives that are happening here. First, that the husband is justified in his paranoia because his wife was unfaithful. Second, the husband is unjustified. He's just paranoid because his wife is entirely innocent and he created something out of nothing. But the third is that either the husband is creating something for reasonable suspicion, or the wife creates a scenario of reasonable suspicion in order to kind of kickstart this ritual. And what would be the case there? Well, the case there would be, okay, let's get some things addressed, let's get some things in the light so we can repair and restore this marriage. So it's almost like it could be viewed as a tool in the arsenal, or a tool in the toolbox of the wife, in order to address a very difficult situation with her husband. All right, so that's one way to read all this, and I know there's a lot of complexity there and nuance there. All right, so that's enough for the laws of the Sotah. I want to take some time. Next in the text, we have the laws of the Nazir. For me, these two narratives are juxtaposed for a reason. There's a reason that these two narratives are back to back, if you will. Let's look at the laws of the Nazir. Chapter 6, verse 1, Adonai said to Moshe, "Tell the people of Israel, when either a man or a woman makes a special kind of vow, the vow of the Nazir, consecrating himself to Adonai, he is to abstain from wine and other intoxicating liquor. He is not to drink vinegar from either source. He is not to drink grape juice. He is not to eat grapes or raisins. As long as he remains a Nazir, he is to eat nothing derived from the grapevine, not even the grape skins or the seeds." Notice this: for a man or for a woman consecrating himself to Adonai, somehow a special holiness above that of normal people. What is this phrase, this consecrating to Adonai? Where else do we see this language? From Shemot, Exodus chapter 28, speaking of the priests, Adonai says, "With them clothe your brother Aaron and his sons, then anoint them, inaugurate them, and consecrate them, so that they will be able to serve me in the office of the Kohen." The Hebrew word for consecrate here, umileta, to fill or to be filled, to accomplish, as in the fullness of days, the fullness of destiny perhaps. The priests were consecrated, and here we have the Nazir who is consecrated. Notice the priests were told not to consume wine when they are in the service of the Mishkan. From Leviticus chapter 10, Adonai said to Aaron, "Don't drink any wine or other intoxicating liquor." This is from Leviticus 10. "Neither you nor your sons with you when you enter the tent of meeting." Incidentally, it says, "so that you will not die." This is shortly after the death of Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's other sons. What does it say of the Nazir? The Nazir is not even to have grape skins or seeds, nothing derived from the grape. Back to number 6, our passage today, our parsha today, verse 5. "Throughout the period of his vow as a Nazir, he is not to shave his head. Until the end of the time for which he has consecrated himself to Adonai, he is to be holy. He is to let the hair on his head grow long. Throughout the period for which he has consecrated himself to Adonai, he is not to approach a corpse. He is not to make himself unclean for his father, mother, brother, or sister when they die, since his consecration to God is on his head. Throughout the time of his being a Nazir, he is holy for Adonai." His hair is to grow long. What is the word for hair? It is a derivative again of the zer, the Nazir. From Exodus chapter 29, we have this: "Put the turban on his head and attach the holy ornament to the turban." This is speaking of the priest from Exodus, Shemot chapter 29. And what is this word for the holy ornament? It is the Nazir HaKodesh. It is the ornament or a holy crown. Nazir can also mean crown. From Numbers chapter 6, we have this reference again of the crown, the attachment to the crown and the hair. So what are we seeing here? We're seeing this parallel, and we talked about that in our drosh today. That Adonai is making a comparison here between the Nazir and the priest. The priest had a head covering. The Nazir is going to have special hair that is his crown. The priest's head covering is like a crown. It's called the Nazir HaKodesh, a holy ornament or a holy crown. So we have this parallel to the priest. Likewise, at the end, the Nazir is to shave his head as if he's taking off the holy crown. but throughout the time of the Nazir, the vow, he is to not let his hair be cut. He's also not supposed to touch a corpse. He's not to be unclean in this way. And this is one of the things that was significant to the priests. They were also not to touch a corpse. So we've got these parallels, these very strong parallels in the reference of the Nazir to the line of the priests. One little item that I think is subject to some confusion as we're talking about the Nazir, it is not to be confused with the word Nazareth, the town that Yeshua lived in. One linguist would describe it this way: there's only these two words only have two letters in common, the Nun and the Resh, the last letter of the Nazir. The third letter of Netzeret, the Resh. The second letter in each word, the Z sound, is different, so they don't even have a common root. The Nazir versus the Netzeret. Nazir uses Zion as the second letter, while in the word Nazareth or Netzeret is a tzaddik. There is also a yud in Nazir that doesn't appear in the word Netzeret or Nazareth. So we need to be careful that we don't find a phonetic parallel between the laws of the Nazir and Yeshua of the sect of the Nazarenes. However, we cannot deny the similarities of Yeshua, the Nazarene, to the Nazarite vows, which would have been what they had kept, and the fact that he came from Netzeret. There is a phonetic peculiarity that we can't deny. But while there's something phonetic and there's something symbolic, there is not something linguistic. In other words, the parallel stops at the phonetic and it stops at the symbolism. It doesn't follow to the language. And I think that's important to acknowledge. There are times when a phonetic similarity is good, and there are times when a phonetic similarity is not so good. One of the examples is when Yeshua says, before Abraham was, I am. And it's not the same I am as in the name given to Moses in the desert. It's a different I am in the Greek, if you look at the Septuagint in both places. So this is a place where I am doesn't equal the I am, if you will. And however, in the English parlance, it looks like it's the same reference. Before Abraham was, name of God is what you would perhaps think is happening there. But linguistically, what Yeshua was saying was, before Abraham was, I was there, that was me, or it was me is probably the best way to say it there in the Greek. It was me. Before Abraham was, it was me. Meaning, who is the father? They were quoting Abraham as their father, and he says, before Abraham was, it was me. In other words, I am the father of the father. He's called the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's the father of fathers. So that's kind of what's happening there. All right, moving on. That's a little distraction there. Moving on with the Parsha, returning to this. So what is the theme of the Nazarite vow? It is closeness. It is this idea of closeness that is compelling and motivational. We desire to be close to Adonai. We desire to do what the priest can do. Remember, the laws of the Nazir are available to both men and women. If you want some more commentary on this, if you can turn over to the Shabbat service on this date, which I believe is May 22nd. Yeah, Shabbat service, May 22nd. And watch the drash there after the Torah reading. There's a little bit of commentary on the Nazir. So let's move on. One thing that occurs to me is, again, the juxtaposition between the laws of the Sotah and the laws of the Nazir. And of course, in the background is the comparison of the Nazir to the priest. So if we've got the priest and we got the Nazir and we've got the Sotah, the woman the Sotah is the woman accused of infidelity, the suspicious, the woman who is the husband is paranoid about. So we've got these three sort of elements, if you will. Let's consider these three elements. What's a connection that we see? What's a commonality that we see between these three elements? And I would submit to you that one thing that occurs to me is this idea of closeness, which is evident, of course, in the korban, which is the sacrifices that the priests manage. Korban, another meaning of korban is closeness or coming close. In fact, that's the nature of a sacrifice: is you come close to the presence of Adonai to make the sacrifice. All right, so we could parse this from the perspective, or analyze it from the perspective of closeness. But what I'd like to suggest to you is another item. One thing that occurs to me in this is the idea of ownership. Ownership. The priests are consecrated to Adonai, meaning Adonai determines their behavior. He picks out their clothes, their diet, etc. This is a consecration to the element of ownership. If you have employees that you own or slaves that you own, you would choose their outfit. You would choose what they wore, and sometimes certain wealthy people would have a standard that the slaves would wear, so that all the slaves had some sort of marking on them that they belonged to so and so, and so forth. So it's an idea of ownership, meaning that Adonai owns them. What is another form of ownership? In a sense, marriage is a form of ownership. When does ownership become a problem in a marriage? Now, I know there's a lot of sensibilities in our modern realm, our modern times, regarding things like feminism and rights and women's rights and things like that. But there is still both masculine and feminine principles of ownership in a marriage. My wife entirely owns me. She has the right to say over the things that I do and where I go. She has the right to say, no, you're not having coffee with that person, because she owns me, and likewise I own her. Her body belongs to me, my body belongs to her. It's this kind of ownership in marriage. When does ownership become a problem in marriage? It becomes a problem in marriage when one party becomes unfaithful, or when one party scorns the other. So we've got two kind of polarities here in marriage. One is when one party becomes unfaithful, the other is when one party becomes scornful. We are commanded to care for our slaves even as one cares for his own family. You cannot treat them with scorn. You cannot mistreat them. Likewise, you cannot treat your spouse with scorn. You must treasure what you own. A marriage in crisis is in a very, very desperate situation. Everyone around, everyone that involved or close to the situation is alarmed and concerned. And so imagine the marriage in crisis, and that's what the laws of the Sotah, or the example of the Sotah, is all about, is we've got a marriage in crisis. What are we going to do here? All right, so I talked about the Nazir and the priest being kind of the other pole of this sort of juxtaposition. So is there something, we've got a marriage in crisis. Is there ever a time when the priests are in crisis? Is there ever a time when priests become unfaithful? Is there ever a time when priests are suspected of being unfaithful? Well, let me ask you a couple questions. If Israel has a level of unfaithfulness, if the people of Israel has a level, if they are unfaithful, what does that mean? What does it mean that Israel is unfaithful? Well, we have numerous examples of this in the text, and that is that they have engaged in idolatry. And there is literally a similarity between adultery and idolatry. It's almost like two sides of the same coin. It's very much an inappropriate intimacy and relationship with some sort of pagan deity, the nature of idolatry. And that's exactly what adultery is. So if Israel has a level of unfaithfulness, and if Israel is unfaithful to Adonai, remember Adonai said, I long to be a husband to them. If Israel is unfaithful to Adonai, then what is the consequence of that? Well, we've got numerous examples of that when they were sent into exile. That's very damaging to the relationship, but not just the relationship in a relational sense, but it's damaging to the place Adonai has within the community. In other words, we have established a place of prominence for Adonai here in the community, and for us to adulterate ourselves with idols is to damage that place and to offend that place, and he's very likely to leave. And that's, of course, what we see in the text throughout much of the Kings and places like that, where the presence of Adonai appears to have left the temple. In fact, in one place, the temple was boarded up and locked up. It took one of the latter kings to reopen the temple. Where was the Shekhinah, the glory of Adonai that sat down on the mercy seat? Well, I don't know, but I doubt it was there. All right, so if this is what happens with the nation of Israel when they are unfaithful, then what damage is done to the priests when they are unfaithful? I would submit to you that more damage is done to the priests when they themselves are unfaithful. It's said of the Sotah here, the womb is said to shrivel up if the woman is unfaithful and drinks the waters. So we ask the question, why would she drink? The only person who would do that is the one who is guilty, but does not think of themselves as guilty. When else does a person when else is a person guilty but does not think they are guilty? When else does a person incur guilt on themselves but they think they've done nothing wrong? What do we call that? We call that self-righteousness. Isn't it greatest in a religious expression of self-righteousness? Isn't it the religious, pious, self-righteous person who is in the most danger because they are likely to sin and not even realize that they are in sin? We find later at the time of Yeshua, he was very harsh on one class of people in particular. Was it the merchants? Was it the soldiers? Was it the Romans, the Samaritans? Was it prostitutes and tax collectors and thieves? Whom was he most harsh on? Was it Gentiles, his own brothers and sisters, people from his hometown? He was the most critical and most scathing and most harsh with the priests, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the scribes. Let me submit to you that the priest would shrivel up in the spirit if they are unfaithful and corrupt. They will still come close to Adonai without seeing it and without repenting of their sin. And we know that many did repent of their sin, but many did not. So this is what I'm comparing. I'm comparing the Sotah woman who does not think she has done anything wrong and goes to take the curse, but in truth has done something wrong. See, a woman would never know that, right? I mean, let's be practical and honest here. A woman would never think she's innocent when actually she's been unfaithful with her husband. I mean, that's just, we know that, right? But it is the religious, self-righteous person who thinks they are sinless when they are sinful. The religious, self-righteous person thinks they are faithful when in fact they've been faithless. They've been unfaithful. Do you see that? And so now we have the Sotah ritual as an expression, perhaps, of an unfaithful priest. And I'm submitting to you that this is why there's a juxtaposition. This is why these two narratives are back to back, to give us this clue that the Sotah applies to the woman, the husband and wife, the marriage in crisis, but it also applies to the priest. It applies to those who think they are above the rest. And isn't that the Nazir? See, there's two aspects to the Nazir. The first aspect to the Nazir is the one who genuinely wants to step into a further level of closeness with Adonai. And then there's another aspect of the Nazir who wants to appear to be closer to Adonai, who wants to step into an appearance of closeness to Adonai. One is genuine, the other is manipulative. and isn't that the corruption of the priest who wants to portray a level of holiness but isn't faithful to the spirit and the heart and the fullest expression of holiness? So what of us who come close to Adonai in the salvation of Yeshua? Those of us who come close to Adonai, that closeness, but are still corrupt, are still idolaters in our hearts. We who think we are innocent because of the blood of Yeshua, but in truth are corrupt. We who think we are innocent because of the blood of Yeshua, but in actuality we are using our innocence and expending our purity and casting ourselves on worthless idols. The idol of self, the idol of self-exaltation. We who think we are innocent, are we truly faithful, or have we become unfaithful with our distractions? What of us? Will we shrivel up in the spirit? You know, there's a lot of believers out there who are walking around and are unfruitful. Can I just say it that way? In their lives. They are just unfruitful. And I would submit to you that this is a good explanation of that. This idea of being shriveled up in the spirit. As always, it's good to be with you. If you have any questions or discussion or dialogue on this teaching, we covered a lot of ground in a hurry. This is one of my favorite sort of parts of the Torah. I really enjoy digging into to the laws of the Sotah and the laws of the Nazir, and of course the connections to Yeshua, and then the connections to Paul and so forth. It's just a lot of different places you can go with this. If you'd like to discuss this more, I would really enjoy doing that. Just a quick reminder, subscribe if you like, and you can follow us. And my email address is below if you want to reach out with any questions or thoughts or comments. May Adonai bless you this week to go with you and comfort you. May Adonai be the sun on your right hand and the shade on your left. May he guard your going out and your coming in, both now and forevermore. Shalom, shalom.